Really, really happy to be joined by my lovely friend, Steve Hennessy, who I've just said to him that we know each other a bit.
Yeah,
We
does
should have a
involve
good chat.
does involve a hotel bar from the best of my recollection. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Shush. We're
Yeah.
not allowed to disclose these things.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
um, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a minute, but what you've written as the introduction, when I asked you to write an introduction that I should read out, you said you are a chartered financial planner, resolution accredited specialist, which there's not very many of us. I think I thought we were kind of 30, 40-ish, but you might tell me different when we get chatting. Dad of three who loves reading and writing, CrossFit, which I don't know if I knew you were a CrossFitter.
How can you not tell from my Olympian frame?
Well, because I am and I don't have an Olympian
Yeah, all right, yeah,
brain.
fair enough. Yeah.
um, also like coffee and wandering around a museum. So
Yeah.
I'll probably chat to you about those other things another time. But for today, we're going to talk about working as a divorce specialist in financial planning world. So have I done a good enough job of introducing you? Do you want to fill some gaps in on that lot?
Yeah, I don't mind. I thought you did a great job. I will say, I was talking about this morning, is as a financial advisor, it's quite funny because we have different titles depending on who you're talking to. So I am variously a financial advisor, a financial planner, an independent financial advisor, a chartered financial planner. It's all the same thing broadly. And then the accreditation, the resolution accreditation, is a resolution of a professional body. I'm sure a lot of your listeners might have heard in previous episodes you talk about them. And there are about, I think we're pushing towards 50 now, financial advisors who also have this specialist accreditation, which sort of demonstrates a level of understanding of sort of working in and around divorce and separation. So I'm really proud of that. I sometimes work as a financial neutral. I know you had Tom Farrell on a few episodes ago, actual legend, walking legend. So I do a bit of financial neutral work as well. But yeah, ultimately, if people ask me on a Saturday night, what do you do for a living? I'm a financial advisor, but with various sort of definitions that can come out when you talk about it. I started in 1998, the week Beckham got sent off against Argentina. So yeah, that's what I remember about that. I've worked at national insurance companies and in a bank and things like that. And then just over 10 years ago, I started my own business. And for one reason or another, I ended up doing quite a bit of work, initially with solicitors around all sorts of issues, whether it's somebody had passed away or I was dealing with like trusts or attorneys and things like that. Then I got involved in a couple of cases where there was a divorce, and like a lot of people, I think yourself included, thought, oh, I could actually really help people here if I sort of do some of the other things that we do. I went through a separation myself personally. My parents got divorced when I was a teenager, so I had sort of a reasonable sort of personal experience of how complicated that gets, even in sort of fairly constructive circumstances, and just thought, well, I'll see if I can be useful over there. And here I am 10 years later. It's probably 90% of my work comes through that sort of channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you? I'm interested in this because I don't often speak to people who have experienced divorce themselves and have it. I think in our world it's reasonably common for people who are doing kind of specialist work. I think it's reasonably common in divorce coaching world, not so common in the legal world. Do you feel your personal experience of divorce has helped you to help others to empathize perhaps a little bit better?
Yeah, I suppose it must do. I don't really think. I don't think sort of directly so much. It's not something that like the experiences with my own sort of separation and my parents' divorce aren't sort of front and center when I'm doing the work, but they must be in there somewhere. Certainly, thinking about my mum and dad, they, with the best of intentions, I think they kind of got the pensions in a bit of a mess, and coincidentally, 30 years later, here I am doing a lot of that kind of tidying up. So maybe that's not a coincidence. Um, and then, yeah, with my own sort of separation from my eldest daughter's mother. I mean, we were fairly constructive and amicable, just trying to get sort of move forward in a new direction for each other, and just trying to be sensible about it. And I was sort of stupefied at how useless I felt at not being able to just sort of get some sort of concepts that are in my head sort of out into a piece of paper and in a lucid way to be able to communicate about it. It sort of shocked me. I mean, by then I'd been a financial advisor the thick end of sort of 15 years, and here I was sort of stumbling over my words because all of a sudden that emotion was in there, which I think, again, the work that I do, I'm very conscious that, there are numbers on a spreadsheet and then there's a human being behind it all. And, they're very, very different concepts, and approaching the work thinking about people rather than numbers, which is kind of where financial advisors tend to be comfortable, right? Oh, great, there's a spreadsheet, this is what I do, a pension statement and investments, great, I can sort of roll my sleeves up and show you all the stuff I know. Whereas, some of the most resourceful people I've worked with are just blinking in the headlights, so to speak, thinking, what is all this stuff? Why have I got to make decisions on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because if I think of any of the financial planners that I know who do this kind of work and work with divorce and separating people, I think we tend to be more comfortable with the person than the spreadsheet, which is perhaps what separates us. Maybe it's it's interesting to think about that.
Yeah, I definitely sort of make sure that the people I'm working with, okay, I'm chartered, I've got a few exams under my belt, but I'm not the most technical minded financial advisor. I've sort of learnt it and forgot it. I just know where to look for it. I think it helps me, certainly at first meeting, I'm just sitting there listening, to a human being in front of me rather than filling in documents and trying to build that sort of financial picture, if you like. I want to speak to the human in front of me. And again, it takes a while to get there. When you first start, you want to share everything you know. And of course, people don't really want to hear it. That's what I realised. Like, oh, let me tell you how pensions work. Why are you really bored by this? But, get that from experience, don't you?
Absolutely. So what do the people who come through your door look like? What is there a typical client?
Um, I don't know about that. I mean, and business is changing all the time, and we might touch on this. I'm doing a little bit more now, say, compared to 3 years ago, of what I call financial neutral work, where I'm working with a couple who are being, constructive and working together to come to their financial settlement. So I'm doing a bit more of that work, but I still do more sort of traditional advice to one party, if you like. Typically, if I looked at my client bank, it's a woman, perhaps in her early 50s, maybe. I don't know if that's a coincidence and if it reflects the kind of professionals that have introduced those people to me more than my business itself. So yeah, and it's such a lovely job in that sense because, unlike, say, perhaps a family lawyer, we tend to work with clients in a much longer term time frame. And some of the clients that I still work with, I first met when they were in the midst of quite, a difficult transition, and now they're, 10 years later, looking 10 years younger and living the life that they love. And I'm just a small part of that, just saying, yeah, go on, off you go. Nothing's changed since last year. So that's lovely aspects of the job.
That's really interesting that the people who come to you are largely women. And I realised that is it's an insane statement, but I guess I kind of thought I get a lot of women come to me. I'm working with quite a lot of men as well, and I know there are lots of people in our world who've set themselves up specifically to deal with women, and that's they only work with women. I'm kind of surprised actually that's who tends to come to you as well. Not that you're not exceptionally approachable and a lovely guy, but I don't know. I guess I thought it'd be the men that would be coming to you.
Yeah, no, if I think back to the sort of the first few cases I worked on sort of 10 years ago, and I'm still working with the same sort of handful of family lawyers or law firms who, just through experience, have thought, well, Steve's pretty good with this type of scenario. the feedback obviously they get then from those clients is, oh, thanks for giving me Steve's name. Obviously, there's bound to be exceptions to that, but I am where I am, and I'm conscious that there's people out there that specialise in a certain type of professional or a certain age demographic, and that's all great. I've never really badged myself one way or another. I just try to be useful, and it sort of shakes out where it shakes out.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. So what would working with you look like? Let's do the kind of standard working with one person. What does that look like if somebody's working with you?
Yeah, again, well, we take the sort of the typical route is that generally have been introduced to me by the family lawyer that they're working with. And, again, generally my preference is to set up a 30-minute Zoom without cost or obligation. And that's really just a chance to have a chat like you and I are having a chat now, really. It's not the same as being in the same room. There's sort of certain aspects that you don't get from Zoom that you would get from being in a room, but that's just a case of me trying to allocate my time effectively. But yeah, in that 30 minutes, just get a feel for their circumstances and their priorities. And obviously the benefit of working with the same sort of lawyers over time is that generally the people that are introduced to me are kind of well prepared for what kind of things I'm going to be asking them. But still they need that, eyeball to eyeball kind of conversation. Who is this person who's potentially going to help me make some of the most significant decisions I might ever make? So I'll just have a chat again, find out what's on their mind more than anything, and it might be, I'm just keen to get on with this, and I know what the answer is. I just need somebody like you to kind of make sure I'm not missing anything. Or they might be at a complete sort of loss where money's concerned, and I say I'll then try to adapt my service and communicate with them in a way that resonates with them. And then at the end of that 30 minutes, we'll know whether or not I'm going to be of value to them. And obviously, not everybody picks up the phone to me, so to speak. Do I need to work with that? It might be, oh, actually, all you really need to do is, ring this person, ask that question, and then, sign that form. You don't need me. I'm just going to introduce a load of delay and cost. Or we can get involved, and this is where I think we can help, and then this is how we charge. Go away and have a think about all that. Let me know if you have any questions. And all I'm really doing in that first meeting is just trying to be useful and thinking, can I add value? Can I make a difference to this person in exchange for the fees that we charge? We charge on a very consistent basis. And is the dynamic right? Because sometimes, you can get introduced to somebody where, for whatever reason, that chemistry just isn't there. And I think it's so important that it is, especially at this juncture in their lives, that they just got someone who they feel, that they're gelling with, rather than, for whatever reason, people clash and that. I don't take it too personally if you think that fit's not right. But again, I go back to the fact that if it's been introduced, if the person's been introduced by a family lawyer that I've worked with for some time, they've probably put some thought into that introduction and thought, yeah, Steve will probably be a good fit for this particular individual because of the way that I work. I tend to be quite relaxed, Don't get me wrong, there's a place out there for a more sort of formal, approach to the work that we do. I try to sort of strip a lot of that away and be as authentically me as I can be, for good or worse.
Yeah. That sounds like there's a similar approach to the one that I would take as well. What happens? So the person in front of you thinks Steve's the man for me to help me with my divorce, you understand. What next?
Yeah, so then what a financial advisor would typically want to do is what we call a fact find, data gathering, discovery meeting. It's called lots of different things. It's to sort of put it into plain language, is just find out as much as you possibly can about the person sitting in front of me, both at a very sort of data-driven level. What's your date of birth, national insurance number, savings, blah blah blah. But I think perhaps more importantly, what they're about in terms of what's driving them, what are priorities and concerns for their life going forward, which sounds really big. It is big, because it's not the sort of stuff that you think about necessarily when you wake up in the morning. But if you're going through a huge transition like a divorce, I think that those kind of questions are just being thrown at you all the time. So to try to encourage them to open up to me, having spent maybe half an hour on a Zoom with me, it's important that they do that, because I'm an independent financial advisor. I just want to put a plan together for them that delivers for them the outcomes they want. And I'm quite agnostic about what that looks like at that stage, really. I just want to find something that gives them that peace of mind that, right, I'm back in control, I'm pointed in the direction that I want to go, and I'm not losing sight of the long term, because understandably, Tamsin, you'll know this, when all that changes up in the air, all that uncertainty, it's totally understandable that people become sort of quite myopic and short-sighted and just think, I've just got to get through the next week. I don't really care about me in 10 years' time. Well, as financial planners, we're sitting there going, well, don't forget about you in 10 years' time. So it's just getting that balance right. So the short answer to your question really is just to get lots of information in. For me, my preference always is to do that in a face-to-face meeting in the same room for a good hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. And, not just doing all the data gathering, but, talking about the dog or the weather or things like that. Just get to build that chemistry, because you're going to be a team. And the quicker you can get that awkward kind of shaking hands and being all stiff around each other out the way, you can see their shoulders drop and they exhale and go, right, this person's on my side. They speak my language, for want of a better phrase, and we're going to get this done. And then that's really empowering that they've got, I'm just there sort of supporting them. I very rarely get too sort of, I don't want to sort of be too prescriptive too early on and sort of just do it this way. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. I don't want to do that. I'd rather take them on the journey and then go, well, you're saying we can go left or right here. Isn't the answer right? And me going, yes, it is. I think that's a bit more powerful for them to feel in charge. Sometimes they're like, look, you decide. But most of the time, I'm trying to empower them and give them that clarity and confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so you've gathered all the information from the client, and then I guess we're on to the bit that the client doesn't see, the bit of magic that is going on behind the scenes. And I'm interested to kind of dig into this bit, because I think that, we charge our clients these fees. We provide an amazing hand-holding service. But I think there's a lot that goes into it that people don't see, that we spend a lot of time tearing our hair out over, maybe.
Yeah.
So what happens once so you've got a good understanding of the numbers, but you've also got a good understanding of the person and what they're looking for from the next chapter of their life?
Yeah. I mean, we have to go off and do our financial advisory bit, which, as you say, clients don't really see, and arguably they don't put a lot of value on it, really. They take it as read that you're going to just sort that stuff out. I think what they really value is the relationship, but obviously it's beholden on us to do a proper, thorough job. We're quite rightly heavily regulated. We've got a lot of control and power at this point, someone who perhaps might not be able to grasp all the issues. And so it's like a fiduciary obligation on us to just do the right thing. So me and my team, so if we take somebody who will end up receiving some form of some sums coming his or her way through perhaps, equity in a house coming their way, or pensions by way of pension share, I've got to kind of find a structure for all that stuff to fall into that meets their needs in the short and longer term. And that's just doing what we do as financial advisors, which is looking at the market that's out there, all the products and providers out there. You can tell it's probably my tone or voice has already changed, because I just don't get as excited about this stuff. But it is really important that we do it well. I have a team of really smart people who will just say, okay, what are we looking for client A here? And as you know, Tamsin, for some clients, it's quite straightforward. They just need something quite simple and straightforward. Other clients will need a load of bells and whistles. The UK's got a very healthy financial services market. We'll go out and find the products and providers that fit around them. And going back to my point earlier, I'm quite agnostic about where that ends up. I just want a good outcome for the client. We are paid the same regardless. Our fee, we're only paid by the client. So unlike maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. There are no commissions now incentivizing so-called advisors. So that bit's quite straightforward, really. We just do our research, and then, and of course, throughout the year, again, as you'll know, we do sort of, I don't know, is it 50 hours worth of CPD that we have to be doing at some point, which is just staying on top of
A lot.
yeah, it's a lot. There's doing it, and then there's recording it is the other bit. So, my typical working week, if I'm not in a client meeting, is working on that research side with my team, or just developing my own knowledge, keeping it relevant. Stuff's always changing, whether it's the economy or rules or whatever. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And then we're coming back and sitting down with the client and saying, okay, we've gone away and done all this stuff. Do you want it now? Some clients want to know the ins and outs of everything you've done, and that you've come up with options A, B, C, D, and E. And again, most of the clients I work with would be like, well, I'll just do what you tell me to do, because we've spent time together now. The person who gave me your number has done a great job, and I trust them. So, you're chartered, we've got all these credentials and so forth. So hopefully by that point, they're like, okay, I just need to understand it and how it's supporting my goals. And then, yeah, we'll have a second meeting where we're explaining the pros and cons, the costs and benefits of what we're proposing they do. And then again, I like baby steps. I don't really, I very rarely will I say, right, let's sign a load of pieces of paper now because you've been sat here nodding for the last hour. I'm conscious that they can present, everybody can present quite well. So I'll just leave them with all that and just say, just sit on that for a few weeks, big decisions. I might then go back to perhaps the family lawyer that they've come to and say, look, this is what I'm thinking that they're doing. This is why it's supporting what you're doing on the legal side. And just, nudge them towards good outcomes. But hopefully at the end of those sort of 2 or 3 meetings that I've just mentioned, yes, there's a load of recommendations. There's a 50-page report that I've written. Wow, it's really exciting. It's got loads and loads of numbers and words in it, but nobody will ever really read it. I have an executive summary which says, look, do this, and this is why, and this is the cost. But they are feeling in control. That's what I want them to feel, is like, right, okay, this is a big decision. I've got some questions, but they can feel that sense of progress from perhaps the first meeting where I've sat down with them, where they maybe were feeling overwhelmed, even if they weren't presenting as being overwhelmed. I say we all do a very good job of covering that stuff up. And from my own experience, as I mentioned earlier, sitting there nodding, going, yeah, got that, and thinking, I don't even know what you just said. I've just got so much going through my head at the moment. And don't forget, as financial advisors, we have a very, very sort of narrow window on this stuff. We're looking at money, and very often in the background, there's people moving home, there's children potentially moving schools as well as moving home. There's all that stuff going on, and you're sitting there wagging your tail because you've come up with a really exciting pensions report. It's just sort of like, you got to be conscious of that bigger picture, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. What you've just described to me, and you can correct me if I've got the wrong end of the stick on this, but that sounds like a kind of end of the process where you're coming in. So the settlement's agreed, the deal's done, the solicitors have kind of signed it, and it's off to the court, and then you're coming in. Do you get involved earlier on in the process at all, or do you tend to stick to the end of the
no, that's a really good point. So the kind of the process I just described there sort of assumed, like you say, that we're fairly later on in that process where the financial settlement is close to sort of taking shape, and there's some what we call implementation work to do. Money's going to be moving around, it needs to land in the right place, and you're the person or the firm to sort of take care of that. But yes, no, to answer your question, I get involved a lot earlier where, again, typically through a professional partner such as a family lawyer or a mediator, have identified there's perhaps an individual who doesn't understand what a pension is, understandably, or knows what pensions are but has one that makes no sense to them, or can't quite work out if they can carry on servicing the mortgage if they stay in the family home if one partner moves out, or have never had to think about what they spend on a monthly or an annual basis because he or she, the ex, always took care of that. And so I'll come in and just spend time doing a sort of more of a financial education piece, finding out what their strengths are, finding out what their sort of blind spots are, and then working on that again, just to give them confidence that, no, you've thought about everything, you've not missed anything, you're asking the right questions to the right people, and your instincts are good. And again, it's just about them feeling in control and clear about what's going on with all these conversations. So yeah, budgeting, education, giving them that sense of the long term. I do all that work before we get anywhere near all those other bits that I just sort of spoke about, in the sort of the back end of the implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you get involved at all with the offering, with like helping clients to understand what offers are going to mean to them?
Yes. So like a lot of financial advisors these days, I use what's often referred to as cash flow software, projections, graphs, pictures, because they do tend to tell 1,000 stories, which might translate this, 12, 15-page draft agreement into, well, what does this actually look like for you? And by look like, I mean, can you live the life that you've told me you really want to live without having to worry about the money? So we plug all the numbers into some cash flow sort of software, which allows them to see it. And if I've done my job correctly, they'll understand what they're looking at, and we'll be able to go, oh, I can see now that actually it makes a lot more sense for me to have a bit more pension and a little bit less bricks and mortar, because now, my lifestyle, not just getting by, but doing the things that really sort of excite me and I'm passionate about. That's all funded. And, obviously it's not a crystal ball, but, we thought about a few contingencies, and it seems to me that my new life is affordable, and that I've been as thorough as I can be. So yeah, I'll just model that. And they might have 2 or 3 scenarios that they and their ex are thinking about. And we can say, well, look, from a numbers point of view, A and B are the same, but in B you have a lot more. So I was dealing with a couple yesterday where their 2 columns on the spreadsheet, so to speak, added up to very similar numbers. But in this case, the wife was ending up with being heavily reliant on rental income from a second and a third property, whereas husband had guaranteed inflation-linked pension for life. So their numbers were actually the same, but I think in that situation, and they, in fairness to them, they're trying to be as fair as possible, could see that, well, in that situation, wife's got to deal with landlords and boilers blowing up on a Sunday morning, and owning a property is a bit more sort of like a business in a way, rather than very passively just, oh yeah, the pension's gone up every April. That's so just being able to show them that, okay, in both scenarios you're going to be fine, but in one of them actually you've got a bit more exposure to perhaps some tangential issues that, which, they kind of understood, but to see it graphically was really helpful, if that makes sense. Hard to talk about some of these things generically, isn't it? But yeah, hopefully it makes sense.
That it's useful to have an example, I think, of where that sort of thing can work. And I think one of the things that clients don't see so much is what goes into the actual modeling, because it's not magic. You will have spent time like building those models and having a look at different scenarios yourself, and trying to think a bit more creatively about how they might be able to come to a decision between them, or going back to the solicitor and saying, well, that sounds great, but actually if you just did X, that might work a little bit better, or they just need a little bit more, or whatever.
And having a good constructive relationship with other professionals here is really powerful. Us working in teams is, exponentially the value goes up for the end client. It sometimes feels like, oh, there's just a load of you with invoices, but I would submit that in those kind of cases where you're working constructively with other professionals, you're saving a whole lot of time and money for the client. Not always easy for them to see that early on, but it does bear fruit. No, you just raised the point that I was going to pick up on, and now I've gone off on a tangent. We can do that bit. What was it you just said there? Where's my train of thought going? Cash flow projections. What were you just saying? And then I was just about to say
spending
something.
time creating scenarios.
Budgeting. Yeah, no, so I know where we're going. Okay. also on budgeting, I deliberately, and it can be a bit painstaking sometimes, but I don't apologize for that, is line by line work with a client or a couple to think about how they spend their money. Because the easy thing to do, totally understandably, is to say, well, I don't know, £4,000 or £5,000 a month, that should cover it. That's bread, milk, council tax, couple of holidays, get the car service, blah, blah, blah. But actually, if you go through that line by line, some anomalies will inevitably jump out, And again, if you've got to know the client, so a perfect example, you might be sitting around their house and they're sort of saying, yeah, the monthly food bill is, I don't know, £400 a month. You think, no, it's not. I just had the best M&S biscuits there are. You spend a little bit more than that each month, and that's just from experience. And again, I'm not saying they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Again, people get to be a bit puritanical. They're all sort of gym going, non-smoking, non-drinking. And I'm like, just be a bit realistic. We've all got to get through the week one way or another. Just put the stuff in there that is a good reflection of you. We can always sort of shuffle that around. It's more art than science, but let's get you in there, a fully rounded you. And if we can see that that's comfortably affordable, then you can exhale a bit. If we put something together that's built on you just sitting indoors watching BBC One every night, other channels are available. We're gonna get all this done, and you're gonna be sitting there, and that little voice in the back of your head is gonna go, "But yeah, I can't pop out for a pint because I didn't budget for it." So I do that line by line, and I think there's real value in doing that because nobody really wants to do that. I mean, there's software out there nowadays. I actually prefer rolling my sleeves up and really kind of going through it line by line, and just makes those numbers come alive.
I had a client that I was talking to just before we started recording this podcast, actually, and she'd used the clever software, and I'm going through it, going, right, but is this realistic? Oh yeah, but that's what I spent last year. Okay, was last year? We talked about holidays. It's like, well, was last year normal? Well, no, because we didn't really go away. Right. So what's normal look like? Because like our holiday, she was saying, we go away usually Easter, and in the summer we go somewhere all inclusive. I pay for all, like 3 kids plus me, and like a total holiday budget was £4,000. And I went, either I'm shopping for my holidays in the wrong place, or that budget needs increasing. But I think that's it, isn't it? Even if you use all the clever software in the world, there's nothing beats having a conversation and going through it line.
Just a human being. And I say, in 25 years, I don't know, I've looked at thousands of families' household budgets. You get a feel for those things. And I'm not there to trip anybody up. I almost don't care what they spend their money on. I just want to make sure what they're putting down reflects who they are and want to be, and the lifestyle they want to maintain. And I mean, some of the software out there now does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. I mean, I say I've been going through I've spent many a meeting going through a shoebox or a Sainsbury's bag full of statements and stuff. I don't actually mind that. I think, for me, that's where I really get to know. I sort of feel like I've really sort of been quite thorough doing that. I'm always, even if I use the software, which I've done from time to time, I still sort of don't trust it. It's like I want to go through the Sainsbury's bag. It just helps me reassure myself.
Well, it puts things in weird categories sometimes as well. So you've got to understand the numbers that you're putting in there, and the clients have got to understand what those numbers mean and what they represent. Because I think when we create the pictures that you talked about before, the client's got to believe that if you're telling them they're going to be all right for the rest of their lives, that settlement that they're about to agree, they've got to actually believe that that's the case. Because if they don't, they're still going to be worried afterwards, and we don't ever want anyone to be in that position.
100%. A cheeky little thing I sometimes do is put like £10,000 a year in on ice cream, just so that when I'm running through the cash flow tool, if they don't spot that, I think, okay, we need to take a step back here. I think maybe I'm sort of running you through this, and maybe, you just want to please me and say, yeah, that all looks great, Steve, but that's not what this is about. This is about you feeling totally in control and confident. And that comes from having a really good grip on this stuff. And you can do it. I appreciate there's a lot going on, but I'm going to make sure that you're doing it. And you've just missed £833 a month on ice cream. So maybe you spend that. I don't know. I mean, I could quite easily get to that, I think. But It's just little things like that. Obviously the context has got to be right. You're not trying to make people feel sort of silly, but it's just trying to make them understand that the devil is in the detail, for want of a better phrase. But that's where the confidence comes from, is having a real good comprehensive understanding of all this stuff and saying, yeah, when I eventually sign all these bits of paper and put this stuff into motion, I will do so without any anxiety about my long-term financial well-being, because I've done all this prep work. And it's lovely when you come through the other side of it. But it can be hard, a complete stranger walks into your life and says, "What, you spend it on socks?" It's not a normal conversation, is it? But it's what we do, isn't it?
Absolutely. You've got to be a special kind of person to have those conversations, Steve. So you've talked about a couple that you were working with a few minutes ago. So how does it differ when you're working with a couple to when you're working with an individual?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a very different dynamic. It takes a very different sort of skill set, and one that I'm sort of constantly applying myself to make sure I'm getting it right. Because I think you can do a lot of damage with the best of intentions in a situation like that. And I'm fortunate enough, that particular couple is talking about, they're working very constructively, but still ultimately are going through a divorce, and there's only so much that I will see or feel during a 1 hour Zoom session. So, there's an element of doing what you would be doing for one individual twice over, but by doing it collegiately and transparently with each other, it is removing some of the more traditional obstacles that we might see otherwise. A very common argument that you might sort of come across as a professional when you're working with couples going through divorces: there's no way you need to spend all that on XYZ, or you spend way more than that, or you haven't mentioned that cash account you've got with XYZ building society. All that stuff, if you can just remove that straight away and get down to some creative solutions, and looking forward, and the dynamic's got to be right, and that's just from experience, really, is feeling like, no, they're both in this to be fair to each other. The first time I did this work was a married couple of mine, clients of mine, should I say, who had known each other since school, grown up in the same village, and were divorcing. And I said, we don't know how to be fair to each other. They would, it wasn't like you see, on the TV, "I'll see you in court." It was just, we just want to be fair, but we've got all this complicated stuff, businesses, and there was a farm involved and things like that. And it was a real complicated issue, and they were trying so hard to be fair. So some people might say that, and actually then you pick up on some, coercive behaviours going on. And again, that I don't think that would be appropriate for me to act as a neutral in that position, But then you've got to be sort of gently guide them towards the right professionals to get them good outcomes. But otherwise, it does still come back to just that long-term data gathering, financial planning. But doing it with each other means that they aren't going to be sort of stressing that this is disadvantageous or something's been left out, because they've done that comprehensively and transparently and methodically with an objective third party. And once I've done that work's done. It's a project, it's a one and done. And so you have to be quite selective about, I think, the couples that you work with in that sort of setting.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I've got a question that I've not prepared you for in the slightest, so it might be a bit off the hoof, and you might be like, "Yeah, that's not a question I will answer." But I'm kind of thinking, when you're looking at a couple's models, you've got models each of their futures. What we quite often find is, and this might be a general sweeping statement, but it even in 2024, it is generally the case. We might have a husband who works, has got a good career, earns a lot, wife who gave up work to bring up the kids, maybe in their late 40s, early 50s, haven't got a massive career. I'm thinking, if I create two cash flow models for those two people, with the best will in the world, if you get to a financial settlement, his future is probably, even on the fair route, going to look better than hers. How do you get over that?
Yeah, again, the particular circumstances are really important. You don't want to flash something up on a screen that looks dreadful for one person
Yeah.
and fantastic for another person, especially when in that example the husband's minded to deal with that issue. It's like, is well aware, well, look, I could pretty much start over, but based on my income I would very quickly be okay. So you've that's really delicate issue to flash about. Again, I'm much more comfortable when I'm working as a neutral if there are other professionals involved, whether that's a mediator or perhaps they're working with lawyers either individually or increasingly seeing sort of one family, one lawyer model happening, where you can set their expectations before you flash any pictures up, saying, well, obviously we know that, as things stand with the income, there's going to be a disparity here, but that's what we're going to try to address as fairly as possible. And, don't get too excited about these graphs early on, because there's a whole lot of, that's what we're now going to do, is start dealing with that asymmetry. So yeah, you've definitely got to approach it carefully, and definitely it's something that can only be deliver better outcomes if you're working with other professionals who can work individually with those clients to sort of, again, reinforce the overall message.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot with that one.
No, yeah, that's a great question.
We are coming to the end of our time together, sadly, because I think I could talk about this stuff all week, month, year. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
No, I say I'm still a bit surprised that it wasn't obvious to you that I'm a gym bunny. That I can't believe that. No, I mean, this has been a really nice just to sort of talk shop. I love your podcast. You got through the 100th episode recently. Congratulations to you. I'm sure you'll get to 200 comfortably. And so many people I speak to, whether it's in our industry or family lawyers, family consultants, also listen to it. So more strength to your elbow, mate.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me, Steve. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for listening, and we will be with you again soon. If you've enjoyed the podcast yourself, if you could leave us a glowing review, that would be amazing. And please do follow us so that you don't miss any episodes.